The Utah Inland Port is a proposed dry port in what developers refer to as the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City, Utah. The term northwest quadrant being a euphemism for 28,000 acres or 43 square miles of Great Salt Lake ecosystem and vital habitat for numerous species of wildlife, some of which are endangered. The widespread use of the term northwest quadrant by developers and lawmakers in proposals and plans demonstrates their inability to make even nomenclatural concessions to the land, framing the space as a homogeneous quadrant instead of a biodiverse, fluid, and heterogeneous space. The term is also ahistorical, as it fails to acknowledge that it has only recently become possible to conceive of the land as a quadrant for development due to the historically low levels of the Great Salt Lake as a result of withdrawals for industrial, agricultural, and economic activities. Fortunately for developers, they need not fear building in the Great Salt Lake floodplains, as the inland port all but guarantees reliably low lake levels due to the increased environmental pressures and water expenditures associated with its construction and operation. Inland ports are large swaths of land in areas with lower land acquisition costs than areas surrounding traditional seaports, as these are located near major coastal metropolitan areas. Inland ports serve as intermodal logistics hubs that increase the efficiency of the transshipment of shipping containers from boat to train to truck. They are designed to minimize the amount of time spent transferring and organizing containers at major seaports to reduce costs, traffic congestion, and pollution in these areas. However, these problems do not just magically disappear by creating an inland port. They are instead transferred from the seaport to the dry port. Costs are transferred by taking advantage of lower land acquisition costs and property taxes inland, and by hiring workers in smaller metropolitan areas where wages are lower and organized labor unions are not as strong. Traffic congestion and pollution is reduced by minimizing the amount of time trucks and trains spend at the seaport, but this time is simply spent at the dry port, many of which are in areas of high environmental sensitivity, such as the wetlands and floodplains of the Great Salt Lake, are areas with more lax environmental regulation. In its current state, the port is still just an abstraction, an idea born out of the neoliberal tendency to conflate development with progress and acceptance of progress as a kind of telos, despite the obvious incompatibility of the two concepts. Telos being an ultimate goal or destination, and progress being the movement towards a goal. So what is the mission of the Utah Inland Port Authority, or UIPA, the corporation leading the push to industrialize Salt Lake City's northwest quadrant? The UIPA describes itself as a state corporation directed to maximize the long-term economic and other benefits of a robust logistics system while still maintaining a high quality of life. They are a forward-thinking agency aiming to channel logistics in a way that benefits all of Utah by ensuring a safe, smart, and sustainable system statewide. The UIPA cites several reports and studies as having informed their mission. One such study is the 2017 Salt Lake County Global Trade and Investment Plan. According to the document, the plan is an attempt to simultaneously sustain Salt Lake County's positive economic characteristics while mitigating concerns that have real implications on the lives of county residents. It also aims to avoid complacency and mere backpatting, instead proactively building an economic landscape that meets the needs of current and future residents and adapts to an increasingly global marketplace. The 2017 Salt Lake County Global Trade and Investment Plan is of particular interest because it reveals the degree to which proponents of economic and industrial development in the age of Trump evince symptoms of cognitive dissonance as it pertains to global capitalism, holding the notion that the cure to social and economic ails contracted through globalization and global capitalism is to increase fluency in and engagement with the global economy through export activity and foreign direct investment. The plan tellingly cites Salt Lake's strong linguistic diversity and deep international connections among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as latent assets that can be employed to create opportunities for increased global engagement and position Salt Lake County as a prime international business hub. This idea aptly yet dangerously draws parallels between the latent racism and colonialism of the Mormon Church and its missionary efforts with the imperialism of global capitalism. While the plan implicitly acknowledges how globalism and neoliberal global capitalism have failed the working class and identifies these failures as the source of current protectionist sentiments, it simultaneously argues that it is impossible to return to a simpler, pre-globalized world, and that, furthermore, such a world may never have existed as it is portrayed. Rather, protectionism builds from a sentimental nostalgia and presents a world that may never have existed as the ideal past to which we should return. Because of this, the answer cannot be movement backward and inward, but must be forward and outward. While it is surprising and to some degree refreshing to reach such a poetic and philosophical argument in an otherwise dry and bureaucratic government document, the county's position is myopic at best and utterly paradoxical at worst. Development that repeats and exacerbates globalization and global capitalism's failures do not move society forward and outward, but instead move us backward and inward, as the plan inversely suggests. As Herbert Marcuse argues in The One-Dimensional Man, the union of growing productivity and growing destruction, the brinkmanship of annihilation, the surrender of thought, hope, and fear to the decisions of the powers that be, the preservation of misery in the face of unprecedented wealth constitute the most impartial indictment, even if they are not the raison d'etre of this society, but only its byproduct, its sweeping rationality, which propels efficiency and growth, is itself irrational. Future installments of this series will further explore the socioeconomic and environmental consequences of the construction of the Utah Inland Port and its connections to environmental racism, racial capitalism, mass incarceration, extinctionism, and accelerationism. Breeding orchids out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots in spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried fungus. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this sandy rubbish? You cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images where the sun beats, and the dead brush gives no shelter, the mosquito no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. And the dead brush gives no shelter, the mosquito no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either, your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter dawn. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed, and their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. By the waters of Lee I sat down and wept. Sweet Lee, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Lee, run softly, for I speak not loud or long, but at my back in a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from ear to ear. A rat crept softly through the vegetation. Unreal city under the brown fog of a winter noon. The river sweats oil and tar. The shouting and the crying, prison and palace and reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains. He who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying, with a little patience. Here is no water but only rock, rock and no water in the sandy road, the road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock one could stop or think. Sweat is dry and feet are in the sand. If there were only water amongst the rock, dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit, here one can neither stand nor lie nor sit. There is not even silence in the mountains, but dry, sterile thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red, sullen faces sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water and no rock, if there were rock and also water and water, a spring, a pool among the rock, if there were the sound of water only, not the cicada and dry grass singing, but sound of water over a rock, where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees, drip, drop, drip, drop, 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 but there is no water. Data, Dayadavam, Damyata, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.